Linda Carter walked slowly through the gates of Riverside Cemetery, carrying a small basket in her right hand. The autumn wind blew through her gray hair as she made her way down the familiar path. She had been making this same walk every month. For 5 years now, ever since Jack died, the basket held fresh white roses, Jack's favorite flowers, along with a small brush and a clean cloth. She always brought the same things. Jack would have laughed at how organized she was about it, but Linda found comfort in the routine. The cemetery was quiet this morning. A few other people moved between the headstones, but most visitors came on weekends. Linda preferred weekdays. She could talk to Jack without feeling like others were watching or listening. She reached the familiar gray headstone that read Captain Jack Carter, beloved husband, 1975 to 2047. Below that were the words, in service to his country and his family. Linda had chosen those words herself. Jack never talked much about his military service, especially his last assignment. When he came home in 2041, something had changed in him. He was quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes she would catch him staring out the window at nothing, as if he was listening for something, only he could hear. Linda knelt beside the grave and opened her basket. She placed the white roses in the small metal vase built into the headstone, then took out her brush and cloth. Jack had been proud of his military record, and she made sure his memorial stayed clean and respectable. As she brushed away fallen leaves from around the base of the headstone, her fingers touched something unexpected. There was a small dip in the ground right next to where the stone met the earth. At first, Linda thought it was just where the soil had settled over time. Graves did that sometimes, but as she cleared away more leaves and loose dirt, she realized this was different. The depression was perfectly round, about the size of a dinner plate. The edges were smooth and even, not like natural settling would create. Linda leaned closer to look. The hole seemed to go down much deeper than she expected. She could not see the bottom, even in the bright morning sunlight. The walls of the hole had a strange shine to them, almost like metal. That was very odd for a cemetery plot. She picked up a small stone from the ground and dropped it into the hole, listening for the sound it would make when it hit the bottom. But no sound came back. The stone seemed to disappear completely in tow. The darkness below. Linda sat back on her heels, confused and a little worried. Had someone been digging here? Were there vandals in the cemetery? She looked around at the other graves nearby, but everything else appeared normal. She finished cleaning Jack's headstone, but her mind kept returning to the strange hole. Before leaving, she took out her phone and snapped a few pictures of it. The photos looked normal enough, just a dark opening in the ground. But being there in person felt different somehow. On her way out, Linda stopped at the cemetery office. Pete Williams, the groundskeeper, was sitting behind his desk doing paperwork. Pete had worked at Riverside Cemetery for over 20 years and knew every inch of the grounds. "Pete, I found something odd at my husband's grave," Linda said. "There's a hole in the ground next to his headstone. It looks too perfect to be natural settling." Pete looked up from his papers. "A hole? What kind of hole?" "Round, maybe 12 inches across, and it goes down pretty deep." "I couldn't see the bottom." Pete frowned. "That doesn't sound right. We haven't done any maintenance work in that section for months. Let me check the records." He pulled out a large book and flipped through several pages. "Your husband is in section 7, correct? Plot 23? That's right." Pete ran his finger down a list of names and dates. No scheduled work there. No repairs. No new installations. "Are you sure it wasn't there before?" Linda was certain. She had been visiting Jack's grave regularly for 5 years. She would have noticed a hole like that. "Could it be vandals?" she asked. "Possible, but unlikely. We have security cameras and regular patrols. Plus, vandals usually make a mess. They don't dig neat holes. Pete closed the record book. I'll take a look this afternoon and see what's going on. Linda thanked him and headed home, but the image of the hole stayed with her all day. That evening, she found herself looking through old photo albums, searching for pictures of Jack's military days. There were not many. Jack had never been one to keep many personal items from his service time. She did find his discharge papers in a folder in their bedroom closet. Most of it was standard military paperwork, but one thing caught her attention. Under final assignment, it listed something called Operation Silent Guard. She had never heard Jack mention that name before. Below, that was a date. Range, March 2041 to August 2041. Those were the months right before Jack came home for the last time. He had seemed different after that assignment, quieter and more distant. When she asked him about it, he would just say it was classified and change the subject. Linda made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with Jack's military papers spread out in front of her. There were several forms she had never looked at closely before. One was a land deed transfer, dated August 15th, 2041. It showed that the military had purchased a section of Riverside Cemetery specifically for veterans of Operation Silent Guard. She counted the plot numbers listed on the deed. 23 graves total, all in Section 7. Jack's grave was number 23, the last one in the section. Linda pulled out her phone and looked up the cemetery's website. She found a map of the grounds and located Section 7. It was set apart from the other areas, surrounded by old oak trees. She had always thought it was a peaceful spot, but now she wondered if there was another reason it had been chosen. She thought about the other families who must have lost someone in Operation Silent Guard. 22 other wives, mothers, fathers, and children who had buried their loved ones in that same section. Did any of them know what Operation Silent Guard really was? Linda made a decision. Tomorrow she would return to the cemetery, and this time she would look more carefully at the other graves in Section 7. If there was something strange happening at Jack's grave, maybe the same thing was happening elsewhere. She gathered up Jack's papers and put them back in the folder, but kept the deed on the kitchen table. 23 soldiers, all from the yawl. Same mysterious operation, all buried in the same section of the cemetery. And now, 5 years later, something was happening in the ground where they rested. Linda looked out her kitchen window toward the direction of the cemetery. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, that strange hole was waiting. Tomorrow she would find out if Jack's grave was the only one with secrets, or if Operation Silent Guard had left behind more mysteries than just that perfectly round opening in the earth. Linda woke up early the next morning with a strange feeling in her stomach. She had dreamed about Jack all night, but not the usual peaceful dreams where they talked quietly in their old kitchen. This time, Jack had been trying to tell her something important, but she could not make out the words. He kept pointing toward the ground and looking worried. After breakfast, she called her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, and asked if she could borrow Alex, her teenage grandson, who was visiting for the week. Alex was 17 and always had his phone with him, taking pictures and videos of everything. Linda thought it might be good to have some proper documentation of the hole before Pete Williams came to investigate. Alex knocked on her door at 9 in the morning, looking sleepy but curious. Linda had told Mrs. Peterson that she needed help with something at the cemetery, but had not explained the details. "What exactly are we looking for, Mrs. Carter?" Alex asked as they walked toward Linda's car. "You'll see when we get there," Linda replied. "I just need someone with a good camera to help me document something unusual." The drive to Riverside Cemetery took 15 minutes. Linda parked near Section 7 and led Alex down the familiar path to Jack's grave. When they arrived, Linda stopped so suddenly that Alex almost bumped into her. The hole had grown much larger overnight. What had been the size of a dinner plate yesterday was now nearly 3 feet across. The perfectly round opening looked like a tunnel leading straight down into the earth. And there was something else that made Linda's heart beat faster. A soft blue light was coming from deep inside the hole. "Whoa," Alex said, pulling out his phone immediately. "Mrs. Carter, what is this thing?" "I don't know," Linda said quietly. "Yesterday it was much smaller, and there was no light." Alex started taking pictures, but after a few seconds, his phone screen began flickering. Strange symbols appeared where the camera controls should be symbols that looked nothing like English letters or numbers. The symbols twisted and moved on the screen like they were alive. "That's weird," Alex muttered, tapping the screen. "My phone never does this." He tried to take a video, but the phone made a high-pitched beeping sound and shut itself off. When Alex tried to turn it back on, nothing happened. The screen stayed completely black. "I think your hole just killed my phone," Alex said, sounding both annoyed and fascinated. Linda knelt beside the opening and peered down into the blue glow. The light seemed to pulse gently, like a slow heartbeat. The walls of the hole were definitely metallic now, not dirt or stone. They reflected the blue light in patterns that hurt her eyes if she looked too long. "Mrs. Carter," Alex said, pointing toward the other graves in Section 7. "Look at those headstones over there." Linda turned to look where Alex was pointing. About 50 feet away, near another grave, she could see a small mound of fresh dirt. Beyond that, near a third grave, the ground appeared to be sinking slightly. They walked over to investigate. The second grave belonged to someone named Lieutenant Frank Davis, who had died in 2047, the same year as Jack. There was indeed a hole forming here too, though it was still small, maybe 6 inches across. No light was visible yet, but Linda could feel a faint warmth coming from the opening. The third grave, belonging to Sergeant Steve White, had a depression about the size of a soup bowl. The grass around it was turning brown, as if something underground was affecting the soil. "This is happening to all of them," Linda said, more to herself than to Alex. "All the graves in this section." Alex walked from headstone to headstone, counting. 23 graves total, and I can see signs of ground disturbance at every single one. Some are just tiny cracks, but they're all showing something. Linda felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Operation Silent Guard, 23 soldiers. All buried in the same section, all showing the same strange activity 5 years after their deaths. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of each gravesite. Unlike Alex's phone, hers seemed to work normally, though she noticed the battery was draining faster than usual. After documenting all 23 graves, Linda and Alex returned to Jack's plot. The blue light seemed brighter now, and Linda was sure she could hear a very faint humming sound coming from deep underground. "Mrs. Carter," Alex said quietly, "I think you need to call someone about this. This isn't normal cemetery stuff." Linda nodded, but she was not sure who to call. The police would think she was crazy. Pete Williams might know more, but he had seemed genuinely surprised yesterday when she told him about the whole dot as they walked back to the car. Linda made a decision. She needed to find the other families, the ones who had lost someone in Operation Silent Guard. If this was happening to all 23 graves, then other people must be noticing unusual activity too. Back home, Linda spent the afternoon looking up information online. The cemetery's website had a directory of burials, and she was able to find contact information for several families in Section 7. Most of the soldiers had been married, and some of the wives were still living in the area. She started with the graves closest to Jack's. Betty Lewis had lost her husband, Lieutenant Carl Lewis, in 2047. Carol Davis was the widow of Lieutenant Frank Davis, whose grave had shown the second largest hole. Nancy White's husband was Sergeant Steve White, the one with the brown grass around his plot. Linda called Betty Lewis first. The phone rang 3 times before an elderly woman answered. "Hello, Mrs. Lewis? This is Linda Carter. My husband Jack was buried in the same section as your husband at Riverside Cemetery. I was wondering if you've noticed anything unusual at your husband's grave recently." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You mean the hole?" Betty Lewis said finally. Linda felt relief and fear at the same time. "Yes, the hole. When did you first notice it?" 3 days ago when I went to put flowers on Carl's grave. It was small then, maybe the size of a coffee cup. But this morning when I drove by, I could see it from the road. And there's a light coming from it now. The same thing is happening at Jack's grave, Linda said. I think it might be happening to all the graves in that section. Betty was quiet for a moment. "Linda, can I ask you something? Did your husband ever talk about Operation Silent Guard?" "No, never. I only found the name in his military papers last night." "Did Carl mention it?" "Only once, right before he died. He was having one of his bad nights, the kind where he couldn't sleep and kept looking out the windows. He said something about keeping watch and holding the line. When I asked him what he meant, he just said it was about silent guard and that I didn't need to worry about it." Linda felt goosebumps on her arms. Jack had done the same thing during his last months, standing at windows and staring out into the darkness as if he was watching for something. Double quotes. "Mrs. Lewis, I think we need to talk in person. Could you call Carol Davis and Nancy White? I have a feeling they're seeing the same things we are." "I'll call them right now," Betty said. "Can you come to my house this evening? I have something to show you, something Carl left behind that I've never shown anyone else." Linda agreed to meet at Betty's house at 7 that evening. After hanging up the phone, she sat in her kitchen staring at Jack's military papers, still spread out on the table. Operation Silent Guard was more than just a name on a form. It was something that had connected 23 soldiers in a way that lasted, beyond death. Whatever was happening in Section 7 of Riverside Cemetery, Linda was beginning to suspect that Jack and his fellow soldiers had known it would happen someday. The question was whether they had left behind any clues about what she and the other families were supposed to do about it. Linda arrived at Betty Lewis's house at exactly 7 o'clock. It was a small white house with a neat garden, the kind of place where a military wife might spend her retirement years. Betty answered the door before Linda could knock, as if she had been watching from the window. "Linda, thank you for coming," Betty said, leading her into a cozy living room. "Carol and Nancy should be here any minute." Betty was a thin woman in her 70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. She moved with the quick, efficient manner of someone who had spent decades managing a household while her husband was away on military assignments. "I made coffee," Betty said, "but I have a feeling we're going to need something stronger before this evening is over." A car pulled into the driveway, and soon Carol Davis and Nancy White joined them in the living room. Carol was about Linda's age, with gray-streaked brown hair and a worried expression. Nancy was younger, maybe in her early 60s, and she carried a small wooden box under her arm. "Before we start," Betty said, "I want everyone to know that what I'm about to show you has been hidden in my closet for 5 years. Carl made me promise never to tell anyone about it unless something happened to the graves in Section 7. She disappeared into another room and returned carrying a manila folder tied with string. The folder was thick and looked well worn, as if it had been handled many times. "Carl left this for me with specific instructions," Betty continued. "He said if anything unusual ever happened at the cemetery, especially at his grave or the graves of his unit members, I should open this folder and contact the other families." Betty untied the string and opened the folder. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, and what looked like technical drawings. Many of the papers had stamps that read classified or top secret. Linda picked up one of the photographs. It showed a group of 23 soldiers in military uniforms, standing in front of what looked like a large metal door built into the side of a hill. She recognized Jack immediately, even though he looked younger and more serious than she. Remembered him. "That's our husbands," Carol said softly, pointing to different faces in the photo. "Frank is there, and there's Steve." Nancy opened her wooden box and pulled out a small piece of metal about the size of a coin. It was covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and move when Linda looked at them directly. "Steve gave me this right before he died," Nancy said. "He told me to keep it safe and never let anyone else touch it. He said someday I might need to use it to help him finish his job." Linda stared at the metal piece. The symbols on it were exactly the same as the ones that had appeared on Alex's. Phone screen at the cemetery. Betty pulled out a technical drawing from the folder. "According to these papers, in 2041, the military discovered something buried under what is now Riverside Cemetery, something that wasn't built by humans." The drawing showed a complex underground structure with multiple levels and chambers. At the center was a large circular room surrounded by smaller spaces, each labeled with a number from 1 to 23. "Operation Silent Guard wasn't a normal military mission," Betty continued. "Our husbands volunteered for something called the Guardian Protocol. They knew they probably wouldn't survive it, but they did it anyway." Carol leaned forward in her chair. "What exactly did they volunteer for?" Betty pulled out another document, this one typed on official letterhead. "According to this, Earth was being watched by hostile alien forces. The thing buried under the cemetery was some kind of ancient defense system, but it needed human operators to function. Our husbands agreed to link their life energy to the system to keep it running." Linda felt like the room was spinning. "Are you saying our husbands aren't really dead?" "Not exactly dead, but not alive either," Betty said. "They're part of the defense system now, keeping Earth safe from alien invasion. The papers say the system was designed to last for decades, but eventually it would need to be renewed or upgraded." Nancy held up her metal piece. "Steve said this was a key. He said, when the time came, I would know what to do with it." Linda thought about the blue light coming from Jack's grave, the electronic interference, and the strange humming sound. "I think the time has come," Betty nodded. "Carl used to wake up in the middle of the night during his last few months. He would say he could hear his unit calling for help, but he couldn't reach them. I think the defense system is failing, and they need us to do something about it." The four women sat in silence for several minutes, trying to process what they had learned. Their husbands hadn't died in some foreign war or training accident. They had sacrificed themselves to become part of an alien defense system, and now, 5 years later, that system needed help. "We have to go back to the cemetery," Linda said finally. "Tonight. Are you sure that's safe?" Carol asked. "If there really are aliens involved, ... Our husbands have been protecting us from aliens for 5 years," Nancy said firmly. "If they need our help now, we can't let them down." Betty gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. "There's one more thing. According to these documents, there should be someone else who knows about Operation Silent Guard. A military scientist named Dr. Henry Stone. He was the project leader, and if he's still alive, he might be able to help us understand what's happening." Linda pulled out her phone and did a quick internet search. Dr. Henry Stone, age 78, retired military scientist living in Oak Valley. That's only about an hour from here. Should we call him first? Carol asked. Betty shook her head. The papers say Dr. Stone has been monitoring the cemetery since our husbands died. If the holes have been growing for several days, he probably already knows something is happening. They decided to drive to the cemetery together in Linda's car. Betty brought the folder of documents. Nancy brought her metal key, and Carol brought a flashlight and a first aid kit. because she didn't know what else might be useful for dealing with alien defense systems. The cemetery was dark and quiet when they arrived just after 9 o'clock. Linda parked near Section 7, and they walked carefully along the path using Carol's flashlight to guide them. What they found made them all stop and stare in amazement. The individual holes at each grave had grown much larger during the day, and now they could see that they were all connected underground. Blue light streamed up from the openings, creating an eerie glow across the entire section. But the most surprising thing was the elderly man sitting on a folding chair next to Jack's grave. He was reading a book by the blue light, as calm as if he were sitting in his own living room. He looked up when he heard their footsteps and smiled. "Mrs. Carter, I presume? And Mrs. Lewis, Mrs. Davis, and Mrs. White. I've been waiting for you ladies to arrive." "Dr. Stone?" Linda asked. "The same," he said, closing his book and standing up. "I've been monitoring this site every night for the past week, ever since the reactivation sequence began. Your husbands have been trying to contact you, but the communication system has been degraded by time and energy loss." Nancy stepped forward and held out her metal key. "My husband said I would know when to use this." Dr. Stone smiled. "Yes, Mrs. White, that key is exactly what we need. But first, let me show you what your husbands have been protecting us from, and why they need your help now more than ever." He pointed toward the largest opening, the one at Jack's grave. "The chamber below contains the control center for Earth's primary defense grid. Your husbands are down there right now, fighting a battle that most of humanity doesn't even know is happening. And they're losing." Dr. Stone walked to the edge of Jack's grave, where the blue light was brightest. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a military radio, but with buttons and displays, it seemed far too advanced for anything Linda had ever seen. "Ladies, what I'm about to show you will change how you see the world forever," Dr. Stone said. "But your husbands knew this day would come, and they prepared you for it in ways you probably didn't realize." He pressed several buttons on the device, and suddenly the blue light from all 23 holes began to pulse in the same rhythm. The ground beneath their feet vibrated gently, and Linda could hear that humming sound much more clearly now. "The defense system is trying to establish full contact," Dr. Stone explained. "Nancy, I need you to place your key on the edge of Jack's opening. The system will recognize it and allow us access to the main chamber." Nancy stepped forward, holding the small metal piece her husband Steve had given her. As soon as she placed it near the opening, the symbols on it began to glow with the same blue light. The humming grew louder, and something amazing happened. The ground in the center of Section 7 began to rise. What had looked like ordinary cemetery grass lifted up like a giant door, revealing a staircase that led down into a chamber filled with soft blue and silver light. "The entrance was always here," Dr. Stone said, "but it could only be opened by someone who carried a guardian key and genuinely wanted to help. The system can sense the difference between curiosity and true commitment." Linda stared down the staircase. Somewhere below, Jack was waiting for her. Not dead, not gone, but changed into something she didn't understand yet. Dr. Stone led them down the stairs. The chamber they entered was larger than Linda's entire house. The walls were covered in panels that showed moving pictures of stars and planets. In the center of the room stood 23 tall crystal columns, each one glowing with a different color of light. "Each column represents one of your husbands," Dr. Stone explained. "They are connected to the defense grid, monitoring threats from other dimensions and coordinating Earth's protection." Linda walked slowly toward the column that glowed with warm golden light. Somehow, she knew it was Jack's. When she got close enough, she could see a shape moving inside the crystal, like a person made of light and energy. She placed her hand on the smooth surface of the column, And suddenly, Jack's voice filled her mind. Not heard through her ears, but felt directly in her thoughts. "Linda," Jack's voice said, and she could hear the love and relief in it. "I've been trying to reach you for days. We need your help." Tears ran down Linda's face as she pressed both hands against the crystal. "Jack, I don't understand what's happening. Dr. Stone says you're not dead, but you're not alive either." "I'm different now," Jack explained. "My body is gone, but my consciousness is part of the defense system. I can see threats that normal humans can't detect. For 5 years, we've been keeping Earth safe from creatures that want to invade our dimension." Around the chamber, Linda could see the other women approaching their own husbands' columns. Betty was crying as she spoke with Carl. Carol had both hands pressed against Frank's crystal, and Nancy was smiling as she communicated with Steve. What kind of threats? Linda asked Jack. Images began to appear in her mind, pictures that Jack was sharing with her through their connection. She saw creatures that looked like living shadows, with too many teeth and eyes that burned like red stars. She saw them trying to tear holes in the fabric of space itself, attempting to break through from their own dimension into Earth's reality. They're called void seekers, Jack explained. They consume entire worlds by draining all the life energy from them. Earth has something they want very badly. What do they want? Human creativity and emotion. They've never encountered a species like us before. Most intelligent races they've found are either purely logical or purely instinctual. Humans are unique because we combine both logic and emotion with something they can't understand or duplicate: imagination. Linda saw more images in her mind. The Void Seekers had destroyed dozens of worlds, leaving behind empty planets where nothing could ever live again. But when they tried to study humans, something about human consciousness confused and frustrated them. The defense system we're connected to was built by an ancient race that fought the Void Seekers millions of years ago. Jack continued. They lost their war, but they left these defense stations on promising worlds, hoping future species would be able to use them. Why do you need our help now? Linda asked. The Void Seekers have learned how to adapt to our defenses. They're planning a major assault, and it will begin within the next 2 days. The 23 of us aren't enough anymore. We need living humans to interface with the system and provide new strategies. Dr. Stone's voice echoed through the chamber. Ladies, I need to explain something important. Your husbands are asking you to temporarily join the defense network. Your consciousness would merge with theirs, allowing you to help coordinate Earth's protection. Linda felt Jack's concern through their connection. It's dangerous, Linda. There's no guarantee you would come back unchanged. You might become like us, existing as energy instead of having a physical body. Betty's voice came from across the chamber. Carl says there are 17 locations around the world where the Void Seekers are planning to break through. We need to help coordinate the defense at all of them. Carol called out from her husband's column. Frank is showing me images of other defense stations. There are hundreds of people like our husbands protecting Earth, but most of them don't know about the others. Nancy laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the crystal chamber. Steve says he's missed me every single day for 5 years, but he's also proud of the work they've been doing. He says they've stopped over 50 invasion attempts that would have ended human civilization. Linda looked around at the other women. They were all crying, but they were also smiling. After 5 years of grief, they were talking to their husbands again. Jack, Linda said quietly, what happens if we don't help? What happens if the Void Seekers succeed? The images that filled her mind this time were horrible. She saw Earth as a lifeless rock floating in space, with no plants, no animals, no humans. She saw the Void Seekers moving on to the next world, carrying with them the stolen life energy of billions of people. But if we help you, if we join the network, what? happens to our lives here? That depends on how the battle goes, Jack admitted. If we win, the network will be strengthened enough that you could return to your normal lives. If we lose, it won't matter because there won't be any normal lives left to return to. Linda looked at the other women. Betty was nodding slowly as she listened to Carl. Carol was asking Frank questions that Linda couldn't hear. Nancy was holding both hands against Steve's column and crying. We have to do this, don't we? Linda said to the group, I think we've always known this day would. Come, Betty replied. Our husbands tried to prepare us. All those times they stared out windows, all those nights they couldn't sleep. They were already fighting this war. Carol wiped tears from her eyes. Frank says there's something else. If we join the network, we'll be able to see Earth the way they do. We'll understand how beautiful and precious human life really is. Nancy turned from Steve's column. And we'll be together with them again. Really together. Not just visiting graves and talking to memories. Dr. Stone stepped forward. Ladies, I need to be completely honest with you. What your husbands are asking is extraordinarily dangerous. But if you don't do it, humanity has maybe 48 hours before the invasion begins. Linda pressed her forehead against Jack's crystal column. What do you think, Jack? What would you do if you were me? Jack's answer came immediately. I would do exactly what you're thinking of doing right now. I would choose love over fear, and I would choose humanity over safety. Linda looked at the other three women. Are we really going to do this? Yes, Betty said firmly. Yes, Carol agreed. Yes, Nancy said with a smile. Linda took a deep breath and placed both hands flat against Jack's column. Then let's save the world. Dr. Stone moved to a control panel near the center of the chamber. Nancy, I need you to insert your key into that slot there, he said, pointing to a small opening that perfectly matched the shape of Steve's metal piece. Nancy walked over and carefully placed the key into the slot. As soon as it clicked into place, the entire chamber began to change. The crystal columns grew brighter, and new displays appeared on the walls, showing maps of the entire world. The system is now fully activated, Dr. Stone explained. Ladies, when you're ready, place both hands on your husband's column and think about joining with them. The network will do the rest. Linda looked at Jack's golden column one more time. Through their connection, she could feel his love and his fear for her safety. But she could also feel his desperate need for help. I love you, Jack, she whispered, and pressed both hands firmly against the crystal. The world exploded into light and sensation. Linda felt herself being pulled forward, not physically, but in some other way she had never experienced before. For a moment, she was terrified that she was dying. Then suddenly, she was everywhere at once. She could see through Jack's consciousness. And through his eyes, she could see the entire planet. Earth looked beautiful and fragile from this perspective, like a blue and green jewel floating in the darkness of space. But she could also see the threats approaching it. Dark tiers in space were opening up around the globe. Through these holes, the Void Seekers were beginning to push through into Earth's dimension. They looked even more horrible than the images. Jack had shown her like living nightmares with claws and teeth made of pure hatred. But Linda was not alone in the network. She could feel Betty connected to Carl, Harold linked with Frank, and Nancy joined with Steve. Beyond them, she sensed hundreds of other consciousness scattered around the world, all connected to similar defense systems. Welcome to the network, Jack said, and now his voice was part of her own thoughts. Can you see what we're facing? Linda could see everything. Defense stations hidden under military cemeteries in dozens of countries. Guardians who had once been soldiers, scientists, and volunteers from many different nations, all working together to protect humanity. And she could see the 17 locations where the Void Seekers were planning their main attack. What do we do? Linda asked. We coordinate the global defense, Jack explained. Each station operates independently, but with you and the other wives linked to the network, we can share information and strategies instantly across the entire planet. Through the network, Linda could communicate with guardians in Russia, Japan, Germany, and Australia. She could feel their determination and their relief that the American station had finally brought in living reinforcements. The invasion is starting. Betty's voice echoed through the network. She was seeing through Carl's consciousness now. Monitoring 3 breach points over major cities in Europe, Carol's awareness was focused on Asia, where Frank was coordinating with stations in China and India. They're coming through faster than expected. She reported. Nancy was linked with defense systems across South America, working with Steve to strengthen the barriers that were trying to keep the Void Seekers in their own dimension. Linda found that her connection with Jack gave her access to the master control systems. She could see the overall pattern of the invasion and help coordinate responses across all 17 breach points simultaneously. The battle was unlike anything Linda could have imagined. The Guardians fought not with weapons, but with pure will and energy. They projected barriers of focused human consciousness that the Void Seekers could not break through or understand, but the enemies were learning. Each time the Guardians stopped one attack, the Void Seekers adapted their approach. They were testing different methods, looking for weaknesses in Earth's defenses. Linda, Jack said urgently, there's something the Void Seekers don't understand about humans. Show them what makes us different. What do you mean? Remember our wedding day. Remember the first time you held our daughter. Remember every time you chose love over fear, hope over despair. Share those memories with the network. Linda understood. She opened her consciousness and shared her most precious human experiences. Her wedding to Jack, the birth of their daughter Sarah, holidays with family, quiet evenings reading together, the grief she felt when Jack died, and the love that made her visit his grave every month for 5 years. The other women did the same. Betty shared memories of raising 3 children while Carl was deployed overseas. Carol remembered teaching school and watching thousands of students grow up to become doctors, teachers, and parents themselves. Nancy shared her work as a nurse, helping people heal from injuries and illnesses. These memories flowed through the global network, shared with guardians around the world. Suddenly, the defense barriers became stronger and more complex. The Void Seekers, who understood only consumption and destruction, could not comprehend or counter defenses built from love, creativity, and hope. It's working, Carol called out. Through the network, the breach points are closing. Linda watched through the global display as the dark tiers in space began to shrink. The Void Seekers were being pushed back into their own dimension, confused and frustrated by humanity's response, but the effort was enormous. Linda could feel the strain on all the Guardians, including Jack. The network was using massive amounts of energy to maintain the defense. We can't keep this up much longer, Frank warned through Carol's connection. Dr. Stone's voice came through speakers in the chamber. There's one more thing we can try. The network has enough power for one massive pulse that should close all the breach points permanently, but it will require everything we have. Do it, Linda said without hesitation. Linda, wait, Jack said. If we use that much power, some of us might not survive it. The Guardians who have been connected the longest might be consumed by the energy discharge. And if we don't do it, the Void Seekers will eventually break through somewhere else. This might be humanity's only chance to stop them permanently. Linda felt the other women's determination through the network. They had not come this far to give up now. We're ready, Betty said. Do it, Carol agreed. For our families, Nancy added. Linda reached out through the network and gave the command. Every defense station on Earth channeled all its remaining energy into one coordinated pulse of pure human consciousness. The effect was incredible. Linda felt the love and hope and determination of every person who had ever chosen to protect others flowing through the network. Parents who worked multiple jobs to feed their children, teachers who stayed late to help struggling students, doctors who fought to save every patient, soldiers who stood watch in dangerous places, and countless ordinary people who chose kindness over cruelty every single day. This combined force of human spirit hit the Void Seekers like a wall of light. The breach points didn't just close. They sealed themselves permanently. The Void Seekers were thrown back into their own dimension so violently that Linda doubted they would try to attack Earth again for thousands of years. But the victory came at a cost. Linda felt several guardians fade away as the energy pulse consumed them. They had given everything they had to protect their world. When the pulse ended, Linda found herself back in her own body, standing in the crystal chamber with her hands still on Jack's column. The other women were there too, all looking exhausted but alive. Jack's voice was weaker now, but still present. "We did it, Linda. Earth is safe. Are you all right?" Linda asked. "We're changed, but we're still here. The network is stable now, and it will be much easier to maintain. We won't need living human contact again for a very long time." Dr. Stone stepped forward. "Ladies, what you've done today has saved not just Earth, but possibly dozens of other worlds the Void Seekers would have attacked next." Linda looked around. The chamber. The crystal columns were still glowing, but more softly now. The displays on the walls showed peaceful views of Earth from space. "Can we still talk to them?" Betty asked. "Yes," Dr. Stone said. "The connection will always be there. Your husbands are truly guardians now, watching over humanity. And thanks to what you've shared with the network today, they understand better than ever what they're protecting." Linda pressed her hand against Jack's column one more time. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Jack replied. "Take care of our world, Linda. Take care of our people. And know that whatever happens, we'll always be watching over you." As they left the chamber and climbed back up to the cemetery, Linda realized that she was no longer visiting Jack's grave. She was visiting his workplace, where he continued to serve and protect the people he loved. The hole in the ground was gone, covered once again by ordinary grass. But Linda knew that beneath her feet, Jack and his fellow guardians continued their eternal watch, keeping Earth safe from threats that most people would never know existed. She would still bring flowers every month, but now she would also bring news of the world above, stories of human kindness, creativity, and love that would help strengthen the network and remind the guardians why their sacrifice had been worthwhile. Humanity was safe, protected by heroes who had chosen love over fear and service over self. And Linda Carter, along with 3 other ordinary women, had helped save the world.